So this week we are diving into something that we have touched on in the past. It was one of your favorite catchphrases for about what feels like forever, and that is time is a flat circle.
It is.
Okay. Anyway, the idea that time is a flat circle is a pretty wild concept from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He basically thought that everything in the universe happens over and over again in an infinite loop. So every moment you're experiencing right now, you'll live again and again forever. It's like instead of being a straight line from the past to the future, it's more like a loop where everything keeps repeating. Imagine time not as something moving forward, but more like a circle. It's a circle. Every moment is both something that's happened before and something that will happen again. This can mess with your head a bit because it suggests that we don't really have control over anything. If everything is destined to repeat, are we really making choices, or are we just playing out the same scenes over and over? This idea got a lot of attention from the TV show True Detective. One of the characters, Mr. Rushed Cole, talks about time being a flat circle, hinting that events keep happening in the same way over and over. It's not just a modern thought, though. Lots of cultures and myths have similar ideas, like in Hinduism, they talk about the wheel of time, and the ancient Mayans had a calendar that reflected this cyclical view of time. In science, some theories suggest that the universe might go through cycles of big bangs and big crunches, which kind of fits the idea of time being a circle. It's all pretty theoretical, but it's interesting to think about. Even in physics, where you usually hear that time moves in one direction because of entropy, that being the whole second law of thermodynamics.
Ooh, smart.
Yeah, very.
Science.
There are some weird ideas in quantum mechanics that suggest time might not be so straightforward. But on a more personal level, you might notice that life seems to repeat itself. Patterns in our behavior, our relationships, and even in society seem to go round and round. It's like we're all part of this big, never-ending loop, playing out the same stories in different ways. Which I guess is kind of beautiful in a way if you think about it. For those that feel alone, just know that literally everyone else out there is going through something similar or has gone through something similar.
That's how I get through the day.
Yeah, sounds depressing, but
I mean, you're not alone.
Exactly, that's really all that matters. Depression gone, you're welcome. So thinking about time as a flat circle really makes you question a lot of things about existence and reality. It's not just some out there theory. It can change how you see your own life and the world around you. It's a deep idea that makes you wonder about how interconnected everything really is, and how maybe, just maybe, we're all living out the same moments over and over again in this infinite loop. So in today's episode, we are going to be touching on some stories. I've been collecting some of these for a great deal of time at this point. Haha. Or have I been collecting them all along? You decide.
You've been collecting them at the same time as we're sitting down recording this.
Exactly. So we've had a couple stories in the past where we have touched on someone seeing a ghost and then that ghost reacting to them. And ever since we had that first story of it, I was like, I'm going to start seeing if I can find some trends or themes along that with similar people that have had those types of experiences. And a lot of the stories you're going to hear in today's episode are not super long, but they all tie into that same theme of pretty much ghosts reacting to you seeing them. And I find that fascinating, and we hope you will too. And we will see you on the inside to dive into some of those time is a flat circle stories.
You are now entering the realm of the freaky deaky. An unsuspecting stop at the crossroads of fantasy and reality, where the frayed edges of make-believe seep into this cookie-cutter white picket world you've been led to believe is far from extraordinary. What you're about to hear are true stories.
Alleged true stories.
Christian, just... okay? Tales of the strange and inexplicable thought only to exist in film and folklore. Although difficult to accept, we do not know everything about this reality. About time or space, what lies beneath the ocean's depths. And try though we might, the unchanging truth remains. There are some things we legitimately cannot explain logically.
And now that we are on the inside, welcome back to the Freaky Deaky. We are coming off the highs of the Dinosaur episode that were released yesterday as of recording this. And let me tell you, for something that everyone seemed to really not be a fan of, there was an awful lot of engagement, which isn't that just the way it seems to go? Where it's like, hey, don't do any more of this, but also we're going to watch this and comment on this more than anything else you guys produce. I hope you're all really thrilled in knowing that we're branching off to talk exclusively about dinosaurs from here on out. So buckle up. Just kidding. That would be the worst. And I don't want that. But here we are, talking about time and flat circles and whatnot.
Along those same lines, that would mean as we're recording this,
Here we go. I feel dinosaurs coming up.
the dinosaurs are walking around millions of years ago. It all happens at the same time.
Well, and we're also walking with them, as
No.
I discussed in the episode
We
itself.
have proven beyond a shadow of doubt
Proven,
that we have
Christian.
not walked with dinosaurs.
Christian, you haven't proven a single thing in your life, and that's fine.
I don't need to prove that one. That one was already proven.
Okay, you can be a little sheep if you want, but that's fine.
Going back to time as a flat circle, though.
Let's go back
Stepping
to
away
it.
from the dinos
Yeah,
for now.
let's get away. It's a dangerous topic, I found out.
There's another kind of quote that comes from a show that's similar. It's like, all this has happened before. All of this will happen again.
Well, there is that theory of like, what is it, the pendulum or something like that? Every 40 years, it's swinging. Is it 80-year cycles? Is it 40 years?
I don't know. There's like different names for that, but it's like there's a couple. I think it's 25, 40, and 80 years. The 25-year cycle is not very drastic. The 40-year cycle is a little bit more,
Yeah,
a lot more upheaval. The 80-year cycle,
it's chaos, pure chaos at the end of that.
it's basically the end of a cycle. Now, the fun thing is this current time we're in right now
Is the end of that cycle.
is the end of a 40-year cycle and the end of an 80-year cycle. And these cycles go back to the founding of our country. And if you trace those 25, 40, 80-year cycles, when you get to the end of the 80-year cycle, you see basically our idea of what to do with this country, how to run it, changes drastically. Doesn't matter who the president is, doesn't matter which politicians are. It's just a cycle that has repeated itself since the founding of this country.
I really wish I went to a conference once, and one of the speakers had a book called, I think, The Pendulum or something like that, and it was talking about that. But the way he broke it down was really fascinating, and I read it, and wouldn't you believe, I remember nothing from that book, but I remember being blown away by it.
Yeah, sometimes those books are hard to keep all that in your head, because especially if it's not presented in a way that there's certain ways that things are presented to our brain that makes it easier to take in.
Sure.
That's why TikTok does as well as it does, unfortunately.
Short attention spans, yes, of course.
But it also, it's like when you have something with salt on it, some food with salt on it, it does something different to your brain in a lot of cases for most of us. So that's kind of what TikTok is, adding salt to the popcorn.
Wow. Okay, that's breaking it down for all the morons in the no, I'm just kidding. That's so picture this, you got some popcorn, right? No.
I can't believe you've put together time is a flat circle as an episode. It's like,
I told you I would. I told you like a while ago that I was compiling stories that were similar to that one.
I know, but it's not even my birthday yet.
Wow. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Christian. Merry early Christmas. I think it's fascinating. I may not agree with a lot of the actual like ideologies behind it, but I think the stories themselves are really fascinating.
Well, you can't technically agree with some of them.
I can actually do whatever I want due to free will.
There's no such thing. Robert Sapolsky.
Yeah, Robert Babulski. Should probably get into this first story before I start raging about dinosaurs again. This first one is by Impressive End, 4826. Says, this was 12 years ago, and I was 9 months pregnant with my son. I was sweeping the porch when I suddenly got this pain and thought for sure that I was in labor. So off we went to the hospital. I get all hooked up to the machines, and they tell me that I am in fact not in labor and sent me home. Mind you, I was in excruciating pain. I couldn't sit, stand, or lay down. My fiance rubbed me for an hour trying to get me to sleep, and finally I was out.
Wait a second.
Don't be a pervert, Christian.
Okay.
It's not that way. Anyway, I slept like a rock. I woke up semi on my side and see a little girl maybe 2 feet from the foot of my bed, just staring at me curiously like a child would. I'd say she was 8 or 9 years old. When I slightly adjusted my head to actually take in what I was seeing, she in turn took off running like a child would that got caught doing something they weren't supposed to be doing. I was not hallucinating. I was not dreaming. I've never had sleep paralysis in my life. She reacted to me reacting to seeing her and playfully took off running. It's something I will never forget. I remember I sat up in my bed and looked over and saw my fiance asleep and stayed up for my OB appointment. She wasn't dressed in old vintage clothing. It was a baby blue nightgown. I don't remember her face, but it's a 100% true experience.
I feel like we're missing the part of the story where this was actually her child.
Well, I don't think she would have found that out until later, though, you know?
I feel like, yeah, this almost feels like a Twilight Zone episode where you wake up and see your future child, even though your child's in your stomach.
There's been a few of those stories as well that I've come across over the years, and those ones are always creepy. Like, wait a second, what are you doing out there?
That would be weird. That reminds me of a very, no, it doesn't really, I don't know, it triggers a memory of a very old Shirley Temple movie.
Well, there's no such thing as a recent Shirley Temple movie, so.
I mean, it was old when I was a kid and saw it for the first time.
No, that's impossible, Christian. Stop
it was
lying.
like, I think it was like 50 years after it was made, but I think it was called Bluebird. And it like, as a little kid, it really fascinated me because basically Shirley Temple went somewhere. I think the idea was heaven and met her sibling before her sibling was born. And it's a pretty good film. If I remember right. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but it really was like mind-blowing for a child, though, to think.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, how is she there if heaven's not real?
That was back before. That was when I believed everything I heard from my mom.
If I could teleport that person in this studio, I'd swap you out in a heartbeat.
Well, I don't understand. I thought the whole point of me being here, if I wasn't here, we'd be just like every other podcast talking about demons and crazy crap.
Now, are you saying that we would be successful, Christian? Because that's not painting a good picture for you, all right?
I would hate to think that that's not that I'm the reason we're not successful.
I think the obvious reason is that the show blows. But outside of that, I mean, anyone could do it,
I don't know, man. If we still have listeners after the Dino episode, so it can't blow that bad.
Well, we don't know for sure. I know there are several unsubscribes. I know there are several hateful comments and messages that I received.
How come I don't ever see these?
I don't know. I guess you don't check the messages as often as your boy does.
I was checking them a lot yesterday.
Apparently not.
I mean, I saw a couple that were like, I'm not really a big fan, but I didn't see any hateful stuff. I didn't see unsubscribes.
Oh, well, I saw the numbers went down on YouTube for sure. Like, which is, again, like I said, is weird because the watch time was more than average. And then we lose people. I'm like, okay, you guys got to make up your mind. All right. Are you doing this or no? But yeah, there was pretty much just being roasted alive by everyone, which is, again, strange for this being like, this is something we don't talk about. And then everyone under the sun that has ever listened to the podcast decides to comment and be like, oh, now you want to give your 2 cents? Hey, man, that's fine. You guys can believe whatever you want, but
dinosaurs aren't real.
Dinosaurs aren't real. It was all a facade. I'm going to go ahead and get into this next one by Lashal77. And a lot of these are just comments found within an original post of someone being like, a ghost reacted to me. What the hell? And so if it sounds like we're jumping in the middle of a story, just know that this is a comment and not so much someone posting an actual story. But Lashal77 says, this sounds very similar to an interaction my friend had with a ghost. She was living in an old renovated cotton mill turned apartments in Charlotte, North Carolina. So this place was very, very old. She was actually getting ready to move because she had gotten a job in another state. So her last night there, she woke up in the middle of the night and was sweating profusely. Mind you, she is a very cold-natured person. She sees down at the end of the bed a woman dressed in 60s type clothing, cat-eye glasses with a short bob flipped out.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, it really paints a picture for you. She said they just looked at each other for a moment and the lady was sitting there with her head tilted with a huge smile on her face. Kind of creepy if you ask me, but all right. And after that brief encounter, she turned around and went back to sleep. She said the same thing. She was not dreaming, drunk, or seeing things. She said she could see her as good as you could see your own hand in front of your face. What's crazy about that is, because this old building was a renovated cotton mill, she didn't have windows to the outside where sun shines in. There were windows to a covered terrace, so it was always pitch dark in her house when you turned the lights out. She knows how much of a skeptic I am, and she was dead serious about her experience. I believe her, and I believe you as well. Thanks. I wish I myself could experience the paranormal, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping it does one day.
Me too, boo-boo.
Yeah, that would be kind of like, imagine the other side of that, like being this person in the 60s and looking at your bed or where your bed was and being like, who the hell is that sleeping in my bed? But the big smile and like tilted head, like that's somewhat scary visual for me. And maybe it's because I'm so used to like horror type stuff that I can't picture like a wholesome smiling woman, when you wake up next to a bed.
What if there was like a conspiracy?
There is.
The reason we have all these scary movies and things like that is kind of to make us afraid of the supernatural or the way we can experience like a different time period, going back to time as a flat circle. We can, and we've talked about stories like this a lot, but where somebody kind of takes a glimpse into the past and the past looks back.
Yeah.
And maybe the powers that be want us to be fearful in these situations. And now we have social media, so everybody watches all these mostly fake videos that are obviously fake, but they get a strong reaction to certain people. And then there's that fear. So we don't ever connect with that spiritual process that probably would help us ascend in a way. I guess that's kind of new agey sounding, but I think our listeners understand what I'm trying to say. It's like we're purposely being blocked from seeing these type of things, or we're being told that they're scary all the time. Everything's a demon. You know what I mean? Like, I
think there's some truth to that for sure. About, like, I don't know if it comes from like horror movies or anything like that, but I think there's definitely some truth to that. And even the stories that you hear about, you mentioned like glimpses in the past and whatnot. Like I wish I could remember what it was, but there was this one story of these people that were on like a tour or something like that, like of somewhere in the UK, I want to say, and I could be completely wrong. I haven't heard the story in forever, but they pretty much branched off and just went and like walking through these gardens or whatever, and they experienced what they thought were people like actors and actresses.
Oh, I
and
know
stuff
which
like
story
that.
you're talking about. I think that was France.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, and then they're like, wait a second, like this is some next level shit. And then when they tell people about it, they're like, what are you talking about? But they like genuinely, the two of them genuinely felt like they actually stepped into that period of time for a little bit.
Like they were in the time of Marie Antoinette.
Yeah. Exactly.
In the French royal court and stuff. And they were walking around the gardens, and it was like it was, they saw people dressed like they were back then, acting like they were.
Yeah, exactly. And like, so something like that, you're like, so what is that? Like, what do you just like? Is it just as simple as like, oh, you walked through some weird portal and then whoops-a-daisy, I'm in the past. I don't know, man. Every time I hear those types of stories, I'm like, okay, but how? You know, like, what is that?
I would say something like that is probably similar to remote viewing in some ways.
You think it's just a feeling? Like
maybe you didn't walk into it, but your consciousness did, or your consciousness transferred into something that was there. I mean, there's plenty of movies about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because if not, then like literally, if anyone was watching these girls walking, then they'd disappear, right? If they really did go to the past, then their physical bodies would disappear, right? There's no way that was actually happening. It has to be something of a consciousness or of a spiritual experience or whatever the hell it is, but.
Of course, maybe this royal place was built upon some kind of sacred energy type place, like a Stonehenge or something like that. You know, because we look at places from the past, some of those castles and fortresses are built there supposedly because of different energies or stuff like that. Maybe it's something like that.
Someone wrote in to us at one point and mentioned thin places. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
So do you think it's something along those lines then? Like maybe you're just in one of those thin places where it's kind of easier to break through, and some of that weird fringe stuff?
I feel like Stephen King has talked about that, and he puts it in his book, so that part's fiction, but he's also sometimes talks about places like that in Maine where he basically lived. Basically a place where things walk out of another dimension or another time, traverse around the area, and then are gone again.
Weird.
Including, I think he's mentioned Bigfoot as part of that too.
Which, hey, adds to the woo-woo Bigfoot theories, you know?
Which...
the old portal jumper theories, those are fun.
Which I see why people have gone there. It makes a little bit more sense. But you got to imagine, we've had so many stories throughout history of different people, different religious figures in different cultures that have experiences like this. So there's, whether it's supernatural or mental, something's going on.
This is an add-on to that other one, actually, and it's from Johannes Yoda. It says, I had something similar happen to me when I was pregnant 12 years ago with my youngest son. I woke up to see a large, transparent, bubble-like ball of light floating over my stomach. It startled me, and I jumped. And it reacted, startled as well, and also made a jumping motion, then slowly floated to the ceiling, and then moved over to the door of my closet where it stayed for another minute or two before disappearing. I was fully awake at this point. I even turned my head away from it and looked back to make sure I wasn't dreaming, and it was still there. I was not afraid, and the feeling that I had was as if it was curious and checking us out. It had some brilliant bright blue lines that looked like it had a pulsating fluid or light through it. I always thought it was my son's spirit visiting before he was born, or maybe before his soul entered his own body from wherever it existed beforehand. My son had brilliant blue eyes, and he is my only child that does so the blue color felt like a connection somehow. I drew a picture of it right afterwards to show my husband what it looked like too. And he said, what are you, mental? No, I'm just kidding. That wasn't part of it. But that's a similar...
It's Bluebird.
That's Bluebird. There you go. We figured it out.
Not Project Bluebird. Shirley Temple Bluebird.
Is there a Project Bluebird?
I feel like there is.
Are you
But it's
referring to-
Bluebeam, but
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many projects. Who knows?
Project Big Bird.
We only talk about the ones we've heard about.
That is true. We don't talk about the ones we haven't because that'd
Yet.
be weird and wouldn't make a lot of sense.
And the government would be bugging us. What do you think about that one?
It's kind of, I mean, look, you know me, I'm not an orb guy.
That's
in
not
general.
an orb, though. That's a
It's-
bubble.
That's true. And it does, like, like I said, there have been stories where there's been glowing orbs or whatever, and it's been like a sentience to it. So I believe that it happens. In this instance, yeah, it's just like I don't know. But the fact that it reacts to you reacting, again, means there's some kind of sentience to it, right? That it's a thing. It's not just some weird astral blob that's floating around your body or something like that. Like it has, I don't know, you can't even say a brain because it's like it's not really something that you can like quantify, but it's there. It sees you, like.
Can I tell you something I've learned from remote viewing? That one of the ways you protect yourself is to place a bubble over yourself as you're traveling.
That is, yeah, I've heard that as well.
And so if like in this story, I feel like that is this lady's child just hanging out
beforehand.
And she just happened to notice it. I mean,
hasn't there been a lot of stories, like, especially if you look at like, what is it, Hinduism or the reincarnation and stuff like that, like people like choose the family or whatever before actually being born.
Or basically the same people that are in your life now, generally in a lot of cases are the same people.
That travel together, you're all connected.
Yeah.
Or like you're like, oh, time to choose new parents. And you see them like bumping uglies and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's mom and dad. Here we go. It's just like a weird, like it's weird to think about, but there are plenty of stories of people that have either claimed that they remember that and I guess that's really the only thing you can do. You can't be like, my friend was this. I know it in my heart. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, man. It's always baffling for me to think about that stuff. I'm like, I'm not really an advocate for reincarnation, but I also understand, and I think it's kind of beautiful, the balancing of the scales or whatever, the actual like belief behind all that, where it's like you slowly, every life, you get a little better until you tip those scales in the favor, and then you go to.
Well, it kind of doesn't make sense with how chaotic and sometimes mundane this world is, that if we're here to learn and transcend, there's not always enough time. And then some of us only come into this world for a very short time. Yeah. Are we there helping somebody else transcend? I don't know. But in this case, I don't think the bubble necessarily means reincarnation. It means that an entity of some sort was there. And it just happened to be this lady was pregnant. So the first thing you're going to do is maybe say, maybe that's my child. Some people, I mean, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. Some people are going to be like, that's a demon because it's outside of our realm of what we accept.
I don't think too many people would call that a demon.
No, but some people, anything supernatural is demonic.
It's super nuts.
Even lately, the whole alien thing is, at least on Twitter /X, there's a lot of these aliens are demons. I'm like,
yeah, but that's more believable if you look at the lore and the stories and like past history and all that crap and like what you read, than something like a bubble being a demon or some like some of the stuff that people are like this, that's demonic. You're like, okay, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
What do you think,
like clearly
the Westboro Baptist people would say to that. Everything's demonic. But either way,
do you know much about Westboro Baptist, or do you just know they pick it and are racist?
I know they suck. That's all.
That's all you need to know. Like, but we don't know any of their belief systems, and nobody wants to because they're clueless morons.
That is true.
But I mean, I don't know. Using that as an example is like picking the worst possible people in the history of the world to use as a shining example.
They're probably not the worst.
They're up
people.
there in top 5, man.
They would be the worst people if they had some power.
Yeah.
But see, I don't look at the story anything like that. I'm like, this is a good story.
Yeah.
I like the bubble thing. I like, what it represents, what it may or may not mean. It seems pleasant. It seems like a good visit.
Now, do you think she was able to see it because of a connection to it? Because otherwise, it seems weird that people have these one-off paranormal experiences and then nothing else. Like, what is the connection there that you're able to see this thing? Is it just that you're coming out of sleep or you're doing whatever this person said they weren't even asleep, but it's just, I don't know, man. It's weird. It's always struck me as fascinating that some people can see a lot of shit constantly all the time. And then some people can just have one thing in their life and they're like, yeah, this was really weird. I don't know what that was.
That's more like me and you. Like you can see a lot of stuff and I've had a couple weird things, but I'm like, cool. I don't know what that was, but cool. And doesn't sway me. This case, I mean, me as a skeptic, if I saw, like, just say, I mean, I can't be a woman, obviously.
Well, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, Christian.
Well, yeah, but I can't in this life have a baby. Maybe in the next life or maybe in past lives. But, you know, and it might not even be the baby. It could just be something coming and checking the baby. You know, like, hey, this lady's pregnant.
Let's send her a weird electric bubble down there.
And one of the things I always say, or I've said before on here, is we kind of are going to build something like this that we see based on our interpretation and experiences in the world. So sometimes we may see things at its essence, which might be a bubble instead of an actual, like a little girl, like the story starts off with. It might be the same thing. We just interpret it differently and we put it into a form that we can understand, which is probably why this whole genre is so hard to deal with sometimes, because we all have a different way of seeing the world. And sometimes we might be seeing the same thing and describing one as a hat man and one as a bubble.
Sure.
You know, who knows?
Yeah, and part of me thinks like the whole, you know, that science, you have to be able to replicate it 1,000,000 times before it's proven, right?
Well, not 1,000,000 times, but you should be able to and not replicate it.
Yeah, my thing with that is like, how, if these things have sentience to them, how could you replicate it at all? Like if there's like a force within this thing that you're seeing, there's no way for you to control that.
Not necessarily. There's probably not a way to control it, but I would just say the technology's not there yet. Like, if we go back, 100, 200 years, we couldn't look at bacteria in a lot of cases.
And who would want to? It's gross.
And then, all of a sudden we see it, and now doctors handle themselves completely different than they did like around the time of the Civil War, where they just like
slap some mud on that. It's fine.
Well, that did work a couple times in the Civil War. But
where are the maggots? Get the bucket of maggots.
But they would, they didn't clean their hands or anything because they didn't know that small little things got into wounds that would kill people later on.
Classic. The invention of soap. What a game changer.
Yeah.
Before that, we were like, it's fine. I killed him.
I remember the first guy that one of the first doctors or scientists that came out and said, you got to wash your hands.
People are like, what are you, a moron?
Yeah. I think he got ridiculed and kind of lost his standing. And then years later, people went back and
like, oh, it was right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that usually what happens when people bring the truth to an audience and they're ridiculed for it? And later they're finding out like, oh, maybe that moron in the garage was correct, or the doctor with the soap or whatever. Am I comparing myself to the guy who invented soap? Yeah.
I don't think he invented soap. He just understood that if you washed your hands.
Well, in my mind, he invented soap, Christian, and he needs to, because that's a hero. All right?
No, man.
Those guys need a hero.
You know how they invented soap? It came after the first dinosaur bite on a human.
Wow. Here we are. Here we are. This next story actually has some I have a couple interesting questions to pose after it, I believe. We'll find out. But it's by Dramatic Lavishness 6.
Love the name.
Thank you. My mom opened a bathroom door, and the ghost of an unknown man was equally shocked to be seen and disappeared.
Feels like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There's a scene in there like that.
Okay.
Not a ghost, though.
He didn't expect Mom to actually see him. Another ghost, Aboriginal bloke, noted Mom seeing him before he disappeared from sight in my parents' room.
I feel like this is Australia.
Bloke and mum, so...
Could be Canada, but I don't usually hear bloke. I don't usually hear bloke.
Are you referring to England?
No, Canada.
Canada for saying bloke and mum?
I've never heard England say Aboriginal.
Australia might make more sense, or New Zealand, but I don't. Yeah, honestly,
it's sometimes Canada, but not usually. So I'm going to go with like Australia, New Zealand area.
Yeah, well, show me a Canadian that says bloke and mum, and we'll talk. But
I can't.
I know.
I don't know any.
Got him.
I know a lot of Canadians, but I don't know any to say that.
Yeah,
they say a boat.
A boat. What's that, a boat? Anyway, hi, Christina. Dad has caught my mom's younger sister visiting her during the night. She too disappears on occasion. On the other hand, Mom's dad has no problem making himself known as he sees fit to my younger sister's deadbeat boyfriend. Scared him. Rightfully so.
That's awesome.
Doesn't take much. Another old farmer bloke had a good old time leaning against Mom and walking with her one day outside talking to her about something or another. Me? A visit from a friend who had died months before in my dreams. Very real. I don't get the rules or whatever of the spiritual world. It's crazy stuff. I do think most visits are intentional, though. My parents also lived in a house where the previous owner had died, but she kept hanging out in the kitchen at night doing stuff. No thanks. One of the questions that I have about this story is when you, let's say you walk into that bathroom, right? The ghost notices you and is like, oh shit, and disappears. Now, from the ghost's perspective, are they currently in a bathroom, or do you think they're on the land and then you just appear as a normal, like, modern woman in the middle of the forest, or for this Aboriginal one or whatever, you know, just in the middle of some random plot of land, and they're like, what the hell is that?
I wonder, let's say that they're actually there and they see this.
Well, if we're talking flat circle-ish, like, then they're
looking through the thin place and seeing somebody at a different time. I wonder what their brain does with that image, like with the modern clothes or the old clothes. Like, we can understand old clothes because we've seen drawings or seen pictures of it. If we all of a sudden got a vision of future clothes, that might trip us out a little bit.
Yeah, but we've seen movies with future clothes.
But what if they don't look anything like those movies?
I think we'd still be able to process it. Like, what, you think they'd be naked or
no,
like
I don't think. I think we'd be able to process it, but we might, like, our brain might replace some of how it looks. You know, like I say before, sometimes our brain will put pieces into place just to help us out. That's just how it works efficiently. Like, when we look at something, we think we're seeing the whole room, but most of that is just our brain forming what the brain thinks is the whole room. Because it's not really paying attention, or we're focused on this one part.
Are you talking just peripheral vision, or
no? I'm just
because you can see movement in your, like, people have great peripheral vision. Like,
I have great peripheral vision, but you don't always see the details. Your brain will put the details there because it's not important. It saves energy, you know, and especially in a dangerous situation, that's why you get that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Because nothing else matters. All that stuff's around it. And if it becomes like something comes flying out from the corner, all of a sudden your attention may form on that and you'll see what it really is. It's just, in these situations, especially when you're stressed or scared, your brain works in weird ways. But it does make me wonder, like, are they seeing the same thing? Did you just walk into that bathroom at the exact time or the perfect time for wherever that other person is to see through and see you at the same time? But it happens so quick, you don't really get much of a glimpse, and our memories are bad as a species. So we may put the pieces together wrong when we try to tell somebody about it or fill in pieces. We need, like, something that can measure that. It's because it happens a lot. People see these things a lot. Most of the time we brush it off as, oh, that's weird. That's what I would do. You might be like, oh, I saw something. I'd be like, I don't know what that was. Moving on.
But that's the thing is, like, I have a horrible memory in general, to the point now where I'm like taking vitamins and shit, trying to boost that. In general, I can't remember a lot of even mundane things that happen in my life, or even sometimes super important things that happen. I'm like, I don't remember much of that. But I do remember in vivid detail everything that was so outside the norm that my brain was like, you got to focus on this shit and you got to understand. And a lot of that is what we would classify as like paranormal or supernatural events, where you're like, what the hell was that? And so for me, like, it's hard for me to be like, my memory is flawed in that. There's a couple maybe less important ones that I kind of gloss over some of the details that maybe get lost over time, but a lot of those are stuck in there.
It is stuck in there. It's not all like what you're looking at might be what you're looking at. The stuff around that may not be as accurate as you think, because that stuff's not important.
Yeah, tiny details are like the overall thing that happened is in memory. What color was his hair, or what was this? Like that shit might be different, but the actual event itself is pretty, cemented in.
And the problem with that is everybody remembers that stuff a little bit differently, and some people are better than others. Like if you talk to a soldier in the middle of a battle, they're going to see shit and we're going to panic. That's just training and stuff like that. So, and if you get anxious at seeing something, you're going to focus on certain parts of it because that is the way we're built. Because all of a sudden you're in a situation that might be dangerous. You have to focus a certain way. But still, looking through time is fascinating. Like this story where they're seeing all these different ghosts, and a lot of times we talk about the imprints in time, but the guy reacting. I mean, there is a possibility you could experience a moment in time when that person experienced a moment in time of being startled. The odds are pretty far against that. Yeah. But it's not impossible.
But what I'm saying is, like, if you walk in on that and that person is startled to see you, or even like the Aboriginal one or something like that, like they're like, well, what the hell am I looking at? Are they living in their time period and just happen to catch a glimpse of this person. And they're also confused by like, what the hell is that thing over there?
Yeah.
And then it forms a new religion or some shit. Like, I saw God. It was over there. Where's the skirt?
Maybe that does happen.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is the time as a flat circle episodes. So they would have to, if that's the case, they would be seeing the same thing, potentially startled. And then sometimes when you're startled, you can lose the connection. You know what I mean? Like, because your brain chemistry changes all of a sudden because you're startled. So you might not have that relaxed state where you can see. Because I think a lot of these times, for a lot of people, when they experience things like that, they might be in a relaxed state. It doesn't stay that way once they see or feel something.
Sometimes, yeah.
Some people more than others, especially people that, like a medium, let's say, if they're real, they would be seeing the paranormal all the time, so they might not react the same way. They could sit in a calm place and observe a little bit more. Yeah. While you and I, if we see something like that, it's going to startle us, and then all of a sudden we can't connect to it anymore. It's like when I try to do remote viewing, sometimes I get to a point where I can like almost see something, almost dreamlike in a way, but the fact that I realize I'm looking at something kind of makes me lose my place.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people mention like meditation and shit like that, where like you have to be at a place where your mind is at absolute zero. Yeah. Where nothing's racing through it. And that's when you actually truly silence the noise that's within your heart, within your gut, within your mind and everything like that. That's when you have access to this shit. And that's a really hard thing to do, especially in a divisive and chaotic world like this.
It takes a lot of practice. That's why not everybody can do it. That's why we fail a lot of times when we try to meditate. Yeah. And certain personalities, it's almost impossible.
I came across a similar video when it comes to like prayer, and which is ironic because I've prayed my entire life, you know, for the most part on and off. And I've had like answered prayers and stuff like that, but I've literally never prayed in this way. This guy broke it down in a way that I was like, man, that sounds really fascinating. I'm going to try that. And I tried it. And I was like, some of the most like connected prayer that I've ever had in my life. I don't know. It felt fulfilling in a way. And I was like, that's really fascinating. I wonder if that's what people that meditate a lot, if that's what they experience with their...
I think it's similar. A lot of prayers, not necessarily for Christians anymore because it's not in Latin. But if you listen to some of those old prayers, there's a rhythm to it that is supposed to calm you. Yeah. And you know, put you in a better place, they say spiritually, but it also is going to control like how your brain's producing certain chemicals and stuff at the time. So that's why a lot of meditation, you have that one word you just keep saying to yourself over and over again.
Your mantra.
Yeah. But those mantras originally come from something like ancient prayers.
Yeah, I know. It's all new agey bullshit, but
yeah, it's changed a lot. But if we were to go back and see early Christians and see some of their prayers, they might sound a little bit more like that and put you in a place where you're able to be attuned to that world.
Yeah, it is all about quiet. That's the main thing. And especially in like this day and age, having these things constantly, TVs on all the time, music, loud noises, it's really hard to get quiet.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm sure you've seen it. A lot of people can't handle quiet.
Yeah. It's almost too much now. They're like, I need something. Something needs to take my attention away.
You take somebody out in the middle of nowhere where there's no noise, like noises from society, it creeps them out.
Yeah. Like, we gotta go. My iPhone is waiting. Get me home. Country roads. West Virginia.
It's Take Me Home.
I changed it because it wasn't a song. I was telling someone to get me home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's allowed. Anyway, this next story is from Ben Singer. It says, I had an experience like your mom once. Yeah, again, it's really weird. It's really weird. It sounds like we're jumping in the middle of this, but he didn't experience your mom. He was responding to someone. It says, I was about 11 or 12, home alone, getting ready for school. When I opened the bathroom door to go back to my room, a little girl was standing there. I think it shocked me even more how shocked she seemed to see me. She quickly disappeared after that, but I felt her presence often in that house. I'd sometimes see her watching me from around a corner, only to disappear again once she noticed I saw her. No, thank you. A very innocent and playful being. She seemed very intrigued by me, and the feeling was certainly mutual. I like to think I became something of a friend to her. And then I tried to Patrick Swayze my way into a relationship.
These little dark things came and dragged her to hell.
Wow. Thanks, Justin Long. Anyway, that was a great movie, by the way. Drag Me to Hell was such a good...
I didn't like it.
You didn't like Drag Me to Hell, Justin Long?
It was a good movie. I didn't like
Oh, it's creepy as hell. Yeah. Sam Raimi, though, man. Way to go. Spider-Man and Drag Me to Hell? Okay.
I wouldn't put Spider-Man in that list. Not one of his greatest.
Yeah, definitely not. Drag Me to Hell, though, on the other hand, I actually kind of wanted to watch that movie again now that we mentioned it, because that was such a, for me, a lot of horror movies are so hit or miss, but that one beginning to end, especially the end, no, If you haven't, I'm not going to spoil anything. If you haven't seen it,
it left a mark. That one's a hard one to, it's like Hereditary. Sometimes you have to like prepare yourself to go back to it.
Yeah, you just sit in silence after watching it, like, okay, I guess that happened. And now I'm supposed to sleep. Cool.
Luckily, I don't have a problem with sleeping because I don't believe most of that stuff. But
I don't believe you can be dragged to hell, and that's fine.
This little girl, you're getting to a point now with your son, especially now that he's talking so much.
He doesn't stop talking.
But what if he starts telling you he's seeing? Because I think kids see things, you know, whether it's actual paranormal thing or just the way our brain is made.
Yeah.
I remember being a kid seeing some things. We've heard plenty of stories. Kids see the world differently. It's more magical. So if it's more magical and then theoretically they could see, you know, through the veil a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that maybe that's what this little girl was doing. She was just living her childhood, but she's seeing some kid.
So she's curious about it as well. Yeah.
You know, and maybe she realizes the kid's not there in real life, so she's not really scared. She's she doesn't have that experience that she should be scared yet.
Yeah.
You know, most of our children's fears come from their parents or the adults around them. That's what it feels like to me on this story. Like there's a little girl in a different time.
They're just as curious as this guy is. And like peeking around corners, things. Most of the time that's creepy. But in this, it does feel playful. It feels like curiosity more than anything.
It's what a kid would do a lot.
Yeah, like, what is that? What's happening over there?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I like that one. I'm going to go through a couple of these relatively quickly because, like I said, I had a bunch. And this one's from Bertram's Bitch.
Weird
name, but I'll allow it, you know? Anyway, when I was 9, I lived in a small apartment with my mom. Since I was so young, I'd wake up at like 5 to watch cartoons. So it was still dark. One time I walked into the living room, and right before I turned on the light, I could see this figure sitting in the same spot I would sit in front of the TV. It was sitting exactly like I'd sit and looking up a little like it was looking at the TV. After a second, it noticed me and turned its head toward me to look at me, like I had startled it. That's when I flipped on the light. After that, I'd walk out with my eyes closed until I could feel the light switch and turn it on.
I've done that.
Before I'd open them back up. I definitely got the feeling that I had startled it. I also didn't feel like it was bad. Honestly, I felt like it was just curious. Like it was sitting there to see why I would sit there all the time or something. It was dark, like darker than the room, looked humanoid, and had white eyes. I could see when it turned towards me. I've had other minor experiences that you could argue were the wind or something, but this I saw for show. The white eyes bit is a little interesting because that reminds me of the thing that I saw in my room that was peeking around the corner. Except that had like human eyes that were just up against a really dark black backdrop.
Which to me again goes to the point where
astral projection.
Could be astral projection, but what you're seeing just may not be able to be because it's not a physical.
You think my brain just couldn't download the body? It was like, well, I know what eyes are, so let's put those there, but the body is a bit much.
Maybe the passage of time makes it harder to see things for how they really are, you know, because you're looking, again, time is a flat circle. You're at a certain point on that circle. You're looking at a different point in time on that circle happening, according to some on the time is flat circle, at the exact same time as what we're doing.
Yeah.
What we're sitting here talking about this now, and on this timeline, George Washington is sailing across that river during the Revolutionary War. So basically it's all happening at the same time. You're looking at this figure in your case, and whatever reason,
this figure was George Washington.
No, you just can't see it exactly. Like,
yeah,
you can't, because it's not, our brains are trained, especially now, to see things like a television or movie or a phone screen.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's going to be hard to interpret things that are just a little off.
But every time we talk about this particular experience that I had, we have a different explanation for it. We've probably talked about this like a dozen times from the beginning of this podcast, And every single time it's been different. It's been like, oh, well, that's definitely some evil entity and go into it. That's definitely astral projection, or that's definitely remote viewing or whatever. And then, oh, now it's George Washington.
Oh, no, George Washington was just used as an example of what's going on. Where,
yes,
everything's happening at the same time. And the reason it can happen like that is because God wouldn't view, or the creator or the watchers aren't going to view us on this straight timeline that we feel we live in. And the reason we may come up with multiple explanations for what you experienced is because it's such an extraordinary experience. You kind of have to keep coming up with different explanations and try to figure out which one it is.
Yeah, nothing is cemented in there as far as like, this is what happened, I mean, there's an absolute truth somewhere.
Sure. Chances are we're not going to find it. We're just going to discuss what it could be.
The theme of the show for no doubt.
The theme of the genre even.
Yeah, I mean, some people
want to have everything wrapped up with a bow on it.
Like, this is what it is.
But that's not the way the world works. The people that try to do it like that end up killing millions of people if they get into power.
And I don't think people in general are supposed to fully understand that. I feel like that's something that we don't fully understand until we're actually on that plane, maybe, or like if we pass through and pass on through the other side or whatever the doors said. Or was it the doors?
Yeah, that was the doors.
Okay. Wow. That's a
break on
deep
through.
Cut. Wow. Yeah. So I just don't think it's something that we're supposed to understand. But I hope when we like die or whatever, I hope that we get it. Well, I hope it makes a lot more sense.
I don't think we're supposed to understand some of this stuff. And the fact sometimes that we focus on it so hard, we're missing all the important stuff we're actually supposed to be doing here, which is just being decent.
And that's what a lot of near-death experiencers report back, is that I realized in that moment that I had spent my whole time working my ass off doing this XYZ when I should have been spending time with my family, when I should have been like helping my friends out, seeing what everyone needs. Like, I wish I would have been more helpful. That's usually the message that people come back with.
But that's not the message the leaders of society want us to have.
Exactly.
Because they need us to be productive.
Yeah.
Forget all this spiritual crap. Make our stuff so we can sell it.
Exactly.
To you.
Exactly. We're on to you, Bill Gates, you bastard.
Why do you say Bill Gates?
Because he's the worst.
No, he's not the worst.
We all know it.
Let's go back to Henry Ford, if you want to talk about one of the worst.
Is the worst as far as like working environment and implementing a 5-day work week. That is some fucked up stuff.
And all the other stuff he was involved in.
Well, the anti-Semitism and all that is icing on the cake of the fuck-uppery that is a 5-day work week. All right.
Yeah. All those robber, I don't know if they're robber barons, but those titans of industry that we look up to.
Walt Disney.
No, even before that.
He was a disgusting man as well.
I don't know about that.
But he was.
But like when you go back to like Ford and all those other guys, the guys that started the oil companies and JP Morgan, they were pieces of shit.
They're like, how about, let's try something new. How about slavery, but legal? Can we try that?
Yeah.
Does that work?
And it does. Yeah. It does. That's what.
Turns out it does.
Yeah.
This one's from Equivalent Poem 7640. I woke up during the night and saw a woman across my bed. Oh yeah. Checking herself in my door mirror. She was wearing a white gown and she was slightly glowing white. She noticed me staring at her through the reflection in the mirror, so she turned to face me and smiled warmly. Then suddenly ran across the room where she made contact with my sister's bed and disappeared like mist. I didn't feel scared at all, which said a lot at the time considering my house was haunted by multiple ghosts. The experience felt very real, and I still remember her face to this day. I didn't dream it.
I like that story, but it's weird too. It is weird.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if you should trust something. Look it in your mirror,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe it's just a moment, like I said, where somebody is realizing what's important, and that is just like whatever this woman was, something at that moment made her happy. She realized somebody else was there and smiled at him, but maybe she was kind of mischievous, like she knew what she was, because that's why she ran.
Maybe. There was another, like immediately after that was by Cognitive Traveler, and said, I had a similar experience in college. A young woman was watching my roommate sleep from the foot of his bed. When I moved, she looked up at me. We made eye contact for a second, then she disappeared. Her face looked surprised that she was caught, but otherwise non-threatening. Still freaks me out, though. Yeah, man. I mean, I understand that like a lot of these just sound like ghosts if you think about it. But the idea that these things are reacting to you, because we've talked about plenty of times the whole stone tape theory and stuff like that, where it's just a recording in time, blah, blah, blah. But that wouldn't explain it being able to make contact with you or acknowledging that you're sitting there and then suddenly being like, whoa, what? And then just disappear.
I don't feel like in these situations it's that. And also, I don't believe in ghosts.
That is true. Yeah, that is 1 point for you in that regard.
But I believe something like this can happen, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't.
I mean, it does when we're talking about time as a flat circle, it does make sense. And it kind of supports kind of my view of the world a little bit. That's why I was kind of excited to do this, because like I may not believe in ghosts or demons, but I believe things like this can happen and do happen. I don't understand how. I would love to know.
Yeah.
But the fact that two different entities are looking at each other, realizing they're seeing each other, and oftentimes both becoming a little startled, that's a little bit more believable, a lot more believable to me than a ghost that is left behind.
Yeah, that is pretty.
Because that doesn't make sense to me when the spiritual world is supposed to be a little bit better and a little bit more ordered than this chaotic world we live in. It just doesn't make sense to me that a spirit would be left behind.
Honestly, depends on what you look at, because there's a lot of places or even beliefs out there that believe there is a holding place between above and below.
Right.
And even I don't even know what the Christianity take on it is, but I think it's something like, I'm going to get it wrong because I don't really subscribe to that shit, but something along the lines of until Jesus comes back or something like that people are like held in this whatever. Or it could even be,
is that like Sheol or something like that?
What is it? Isn't that Judaism though? Or is that,
But a lot of the different, especially ancient religions, have this place.
Yeah, but it could even be as simple as hell.
From like Norse hell or our hell?
Our hell. You know, people talk about like hell being this giant fire pit or whatever, but the entire concept of hell is being separated from the love of God, right?
That's it. That's what we believe.
That's what the preaching is that it is just a separation from God. And so you could still technically be on this plane of existence as a spirit or whatever, and just, I'm sure it'd be confusing as hell. It'll probably be dark, whatever. But I mean, I don't really believe that, but
I think hell took on a totally different meaning. And
when you got brimstone preachers,
after Dante wrote his stuff, before then, hell was looked at not quite as the same way. It was a way station, a place you travel through on the way to wherever you're going.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what it is in a lot of religions around the world that are either existed around the time of Christianity or a little bit before it. They all, the Norse have something similar, just with one L. And it's not so bad. So the fire and brimstone stuff seems to have come after Dante and been embellished, which is one of the reasons I don't believe in hell. I can believe that maybe whatever is us, our spirit or whatever you want to call it, maybe has to stop somewhere on the way. I don't think there's necessarily judgment unless it's like a reincarnation thing where like you didn't really accomplish what you needed to. You're going back, so, or you finished at all your learning. Now you can go to the next level.
Wow.
Like Donkey Kong.
Yeah. We did it.
You killed the boss. Time to move on.
Give me that barrel, Diddy. Whoops. Bad time for a Diddy reference, but it's fine. This next one is called Daughter Visiting from the Future.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like
so
this
now
one.
This is what we're kind of talking about in the beginning, right? And that's probably why I was like, well, I've heard plenty of those stories, and it's because I saved one for later. Classic me. But this is by Desperate Pair 860.
Desperate Pair of what?
Pear.
Oh, okay.
A desperate fruit. Well,
yeah,
I'll allow it. When I was about 7 or 8 months pregnant, I woke up to find a little girl about 4 years old leaning on my nightstand with her elbow just looking at me. She had blonde hair, a little past her shoulders, and had bangs. I had been going through a bad stretch of not sleeping well, and I just looked at her and mumbled, "Not tonight," and rolled over and went back to sleep. That little girl turned out to be my daughter. I had to wait 4 years to find out, though. That would be wild. Do you tell your daughter at that point, like when she's older, be like, I saw you 4 years before you're actually...
What if your daughter... I know.
Yeah, she's like, I saw you. And you're like, oh, God,
and you just turned your back on me, Mom.
I know there's a lot of kids that have those stories, though, right? They're like, or even there was one where I think the dad was constantly yelling at the mom or something like that when she was pregnant with him. And when the daughter came out, when she was like 5 or 6, she was like, "You were the worst. Like, you were always yelling at mom. You were throwing things. You were violent." And the dad was like, "Oh shit, how do you know that?" You know, it's wild, man. That pregnancy, it's got to do some kind of weird energy out there with it.
And technically, and we know that babies in utero hear and experience things their mother experiences.
That is very true. Yes.
But we also know you can't have memories at that point. So there's if you can't if the memories don't work properly because your brain's not formed properly.
Sure, you can say that.
There's something else that is helping you remember something like that. So in this case, you would almost have to say there is something spiritual there, because your brain is not going to be able to hold those memories.
Yeah.
So something else was there experiencing this.
Unless you're Ashton Kutcher in The Butterfly Effect, or you're Terrence Howard in The Reality Effect.
Who's Terrence Howard?
You're not going to do that again. How dare you?
Oh, that guy that doesn't know what he's talking about.
That guy that has plenty of valuable points, and maybe some of them are crazy, but he has some actually very...
I struggled to find any.
Well, you struggle to find a lot of logic. But he was a good actor.
I miss him as an actor. I wish he would just go back to it.
He's still technically an actor. You can do both.
I haven't seen him in anything decent.
I am acting like I'm having a good time right now, Christian, as well as producing a podcast. You can do both.
You're just pretending? You're faking it?
Until we're making it. Yeah, that shit's weird. I don't know, man. Everything's too weird. In the world, everything is too weird.
Like, this is
great. I love it.
What's crazy is when we sit down and record, this is my normal place. This is like my little place to like get away from all that and just enjoy talking about spooky stuff.
The weirder stuff in life.
Yeah.
The regular world is pretty boring, but I mean, we are in an election year, so that's going to get a lot weirder and more chaotic.
I have tuned out.
Have you?
For the most part.
Well, that checks out.
I'd like maybe to ask the listeners, if time is truly a flat circle, would that change the way you view or live your life? You know what I mean? Like, does that change your perspective on things? Tell us in the comments.
It's like after this episode, our listeners are just like,
"Oh my God! Wow!"
Yeah.
Is that what's her name?
That's a man.
Was it?
Yeah.
Sounded like the girl from...
I think it has something to do with the rainbow. I want to say maybe.
Oh, you know what? I feel it may not be a rainbow, but I feel like I've heard that before, and it kind of was something like that.
That's like one of my favorite clips of all time. Anyway, yeah, we'll close out on this one by Rapid Mitch.
Oh.
I was working at a country club, setting up a small banquet room for the next day's party. I was by myself putting silverware out on the table in a closed room and suddenly felt chills. They were multiplying. No, I felt like I was being, well, I have to do that whenever someone says felt chills, and it's annoying, and I'm over it. Anyway, here we go. I felt like I was being watched. I turned around and saw a face of a boy, maybe 8 or 9, crouched under a table staring at me. The boy had brown eyes and dark hair that fell over to the side of his head as he was leaning over, looking at me through the legs of a chair. When I saw he was staring at me, I responded with surprise, realizing that I could see him. His eyes got big, and he responded with a look of surprise on his face. That scared me more than being watched. I jumped back and leaned against the wall with my heart pounding. Trying to figure out what to do, I leaned forward and looked to see where he was. Nothing was there. He was gone, and there was no one in the room or had left the room. It was very late at night. I was setting up by myself, so I knew there were no guests in the building. This was an experience where I could see the boy plain as day. I could describe to you what his face looked like, his hair, his eyes, the shape of his mouth and nose. He was there underneath that table watching me, and he reacted when he saw that I could see him. Pretty spooky.
Is it though?
I mean, I get like his reaction might have been a little much, but if you add on to that the fact that he knew he was alone, he was setting out, it was late at night, like there shouldn't be a small boy in this room whatsoever.
I feel like we should teach people in school the difference between like whatever this guy was experiencing and being startled, because I don't think we have too many people just freak the hell out when they see something.
Yeah.
And I think they miss everything that they could. We would have some of these paranormal things solved if people didn't let fear get the best of them when they're
I must approach this.
which,
They'll probably just disappear. That's what usually happens, right?
well, it's also easy for me to say that because I don't see this crap.
That is true.
And anything I ever saw was basically in one house
True.
near potential burial grounds.
Also true, I guess.
So my own personal poltergeist. Luckily, I didn't have anything like that happen.
Yet. We just got to get you to a haunted location, Christian. That's really all it's going to take.
I have been to a haunted location, and I did have a little bit of experience, but I didn't see anything.
Well, there you have it, folks. Now's your chance to give us your thoughts on what you think about this. Have you ever seen a ghost and had the ghost experience you? Well, that sounds a lot more perverted than I was hoping, but I'll allow it. I do remember one time being startled when I awoke, and this is where most of my experiences happen as well, but I awoke and there was must have been like 6 to 8 year old boy just standing in the corner of my room wearing overalls, looking at me. Or not overalls, I'm sorry, suspenders. Like you would imagine the 1800s or some shit.
Right.
Didn't say anything, didn't do anything. Scared the shit out of me though, because I was just like, what is he doing here? But yeah, he was just staring at me, and then that's all I remember. I was like, okay, I guess that. So maybe I experienced it too, who knows? But have you out there had any experiences similar to this where a ghost witnesses you while you witness it? We'd like to hear it. Send it to the gang at thefreakydeaky.com, where you can also send your personal paranormal experiences for listener story episodes. And in the meantime, you can find us on social media at Freaky Deaky Pod across the board. Buy some merch, donate if you want to help keep the lights on around here. Leave a review and be nice to your neighbors and loved ones.
Because time is a flat circle.
And if you're mean, then you're always being mean constantly, nonstop, all the time, and you can't have that. And time is confusing, and that's fine. We're not here to solve that. But
time is a construct.
Time is a construct. Sure. Anyway. We will see you right back here next week where we're going to be talking about haunted items. And you're going to want to be there. Or you're going to want to be square. Those are the options.
We almost need an episode of TFD After Dark when we finally do it. Of haunted X-rated items.
Actually, I have one of those.
You have a haunted X-rated item?
Not so much X-rated item, but it is like a nightgown. This woman was like, every time I try to sleep with someone was wearing this nightgown, we'd break up. Never actually slept with anyone wearing it. But every time they were getting close, and she was like, I'm going to wear that nightgown tonight. Gone. They disappeared. Right in front of her eyes. No, not like that, but it's fine. We'll talk about that at some point when we get to our After Dark segment, which seems to have already been started by someone else now. That's fine. Anyway, we'll see ya. Goodbye.